"Who the hell hurt you?" asked the Italian mafia boss by sunrise. Her stepfather had vanished. 3 in the morning in Port Meridian, and the city was a ghost, exhaling salt. Noah Breyer sat on the running board of a fire truck, the rotating red lights painting wet streaks on the slick asphalt. Foam, iridescent and thick, still clung to the gutters, the chemical smell mixing with the sharp tang of the Pacific. The air should have smelled like the ocean. Instead, it smelled of gasoline and wet ash. This was not a wiring fault. This was intent. She winced, jamming her thumb against the base of her left wrist. The pop was sickeningly quiet, a wet snap as the bone settled back into its socket. She'd been pushed, hard, during the final structural sweep of the underground bar. Just as the last flames were dying, someone had sent her sprawling into a load-bearing pillar. She grabbed a roll of white athletic tape from her go bag, her teeth gritted as she began to wrap the joint. Her movements were practiced, angry and precise. She was a senior inspector for the Port Meridian Fire and Structures Bureau. Getting hurt was part of the job. Being assaulted was not. Noah stood, her gaze sweeping the charred alleyway, the burn pattern on the door jamb, a perfect, low crescent, screamed accelerant. She photographed it, her breath fogging in the damp air. That is when she saw it. A black sedan, idling halfway down the block, its lights off. It had been there for 10 minutes. A silent predator in the urban shadows. Her stomach tightened. This was the 3rd fire in 6 weeks to perfectly match a high-risk vulnerability report she herself had filed. As she packed her kit, the sedan's engine remained silent, but a different vehicle emerged from the waterfront fog. It was a luxury SUV, the kind of black that seemed to drink the light. It glided to the curb with an expensive, electric hum. A man in a suit that cost more than her car stepped out from the driver's side, walked to the rear door, and opened it. He stood beside it, a mountain of quiet loyalty. Noah paused, her hand on the handle of her own dented truck. Inside the SUV, a man sat in the deep shadows. All she could see was the sharp cut of a dark lapel and the glint of a heavy, understated watch. Then he leaned forward, and the rotating red lights of the fire truck caught his face. He looked Italian, perhaps in his late 30s, with a face that was all elegant lines and brutal history. His eyes were dark, and his presence felt like a finely crafted dagger wrapped in velvet. Luca Belandi. She knew the name. Everyone in Port Meridian knew the name. He did not raise his voice, yet it cut through the distant sirens and the hiss of the dying fire. It was deep, smooth, and held an unnerving calm. "Who the hell hurt you?" The question was so direct it felt like an interrogation light. It bypassed the fire, the sedan, the job. It aimed squarely at the fresh, stark white wrap on her wrist, but it seemed to see more. It saw the yellowing bruise on her jaw, hidden poorly with concealer, from 3 nights ago. The question peeled back the professional shell she wore, the armor of her PMFSB uniform. She was forced to admit, if only to herself, that the new injury from the fire was just layered on top of the old ones. The latest bruise was not from a stranger in a burning building. It was from Evan Pike, her stepfather, the man who held her bank accounts hostage while borrowing against her name with loan sharks. Luca Belandi's gaze dropped to the tape on her wrist. He did not need to see the other bruises. He understood the specific, suffocating terror of a danger that waits at home. He knew the kind of fear that sits on your pillow. He nodded once, a small, sharp gesture to the man holding the door. "Take her to Orchard Pier." The bodyguard did not ask. He gestured numbly. Before she could process the command, Noah found herself sliding onto the plush leather. The door closed with a heavy, soundproof thump. The world outside vanished. The car smelled of expensive leather and clean ozone. As the SUV moved, Luca spoke again, his voice never rising above a measured calm. "Evan Pike has been busy." Noah froze. He's connected to the string of nightclub fires. He's leveraging them for insurance payouts. Luca turned his head. his profile sharp in the passing streetlights, but he is not the architect. Someone in this city has been using your inspection reports, Noah, using them as a target list. Ice flooded her veins. This was her deepest professional fear realized. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said, her voice tight. "I want no part of this. Your world, Mr. Belandi, I want nothing to do with it." "My world is the one you are already in," Luca replied, his tone unchanged. A simple statement of fact. You just did not know you were a player. Tonight, you only need to tell the truth. I will handle the rest. They arrived at Orchard Pier. It was a long, dark stretch of wood jutting into the black, churning water. The air was cold and clean. The bodyguard stayed by the car. Luca walked with her, his hands in the pockets of his fine wool overcoat, leaving a polite, respectful distance between them. He did not crowd her. Her phone buzzed. Her stomach dropped. The caller ID was Evan. She flinched, a reaction so ingrained she could not stop it. Luca saw. He simply waited, she answered, her voice trembling slightly. "Hello." Evan's voice was a gravelly whisper, thick with cheap whiskey and menace. "I hear you were asking questions at the fire. Noah, you keep your mouth shut. You do not say a word about anything. You understand me, not unless you want to be sleeping under a bridge. You keep quiet if you want to keep that apartment." The night was silent. Luca had not moved, but in the stillness of the pier, he heard every single word. Noah's knuckles were white on the phone. She hung up, her body shaking, not from the cold, but from the familiar, sickening adrenaline. Luca looked out at the water. The first hint of gray was touching the horizon. His eyes, when he turned back to her, were completely black. The velvet was gone. Only the dagger remained. He spoke softly, enunciating every single syllable with chilling precision. "By sunrise, he is gone." He did not wait for a reply. He pulled out his own phone and made a call, speaking in rapid, low Italian. It was not a discussion. It was a series of orders. Men materialized from the shadows near the SUV, separating and moving with lethal purpose. A drumbeat had started. Noah Breyer stood alone on the wooden pier, the salt spray cold on her face. The wind was fierce, whipping her hair across her eyes, but for the first time in 10 years, she felt the iron grip of fear finally begin to loosen. She watched the dark water, waiting for the sun. The sunrise was a pale, watery gray, just as Luca had promised. Noah let herself into her own apartment, her wrapped wrist aching. The silence was absolute. Evan was gone. There was no sign of struggle, no overturned furniture, no note. He had simply vanished, as if the tide had pulled him out to sea. The oppressive weight of his presence, the lingering smell of stale beer and anger, was gone. The air was just air. But he had not left quietly. On the kitchen counter, placed dead center, was a small brass key for a hotel safe deposit box. Next to it, a grainy photograph of an invoice, crumpled and smoothed out again. The header read, Orion Trust, a shell corporation. Noah had run the name 2 weeks ago. It did not exist on any public register. It was a ghost. She met Luca an hour later in a sterile corporate boardroom downtown, a place that screamed legitimate business. He slid a tablet across the polished mahogany. It showed Evan alive, sitting in a bare room, looking confused but unharmed. "He is not dead," Luca said, his voice the same calm baritone as the night before. "He's being moved off the board. My people are speaking with him." "Your people?" "The Bureau d'Ombra, my internal division. They specialize in logistics and extraction, not violence. He's being analyzed." Analyzed. The word was cold, clinical. "You are using him," Noah stated. "Not an accusation, just a fact." "We are extracting the link to Orion Trust," Luca corrected. "They used your reports. They used his greed. They endangered you. I'm simply rearranging the pieces." Noah looked at the tablet, then at the man. "I will help," she said, her voice finding its steel. "But I have conditions. I am not your asset. I am not your property. I am not leverage. I cooperate as an independent consultant, or I walk right now and take what I know to the MIC. Luca watched her, his expression unreadable. He seemed to appreciate the boundary. Belandi Holdings has a legitimate, multi-million-dollar portfolio of commercial real estate, Asi, he said. It requires constant safety audits to remain insured. He pushed a second document across the table. A contract. You will be retained as a consultant for structural integrity and fire code compliance. Your rate is triple your current salary. Your findings are your own. You report only to me. You are independent. She read the terms. It was ironclad. It protected her. Legally. She signed it. Noah Breyer was now, officially, working with Luca Belandi. Not for him. The hotel key was for a small, dusty establishment near the docks. The safe deposit box contained only a thumb drive and a schematic. It was not a building plan, but a diagram of a fire suppression system for an abandoned shipping warehouse in the industrial sector. This is old tech, Noah murmured, tracing the lines on the schematic. A deluge system, but this notation here, it is not standard. They went to the warehouse. It smelled of rust and tidal decay. In the riser room, behind a panel marked manual purge, was a secondary keypad. The schematic showed the code sequence. Noah's hands froze. She recognized the numbers. He did not even try to hide it. She whispered, disgust rising in her throat. She typed in her own birth date 1024, October 24th. The system clicked, and a small, waterproof cache hidden inside the main drain pipe unlocked. Evan had been using her identity for this, too. The drive contained files, not financial ledgers, but official government documents, asset forfeiture orders, dozens of them, all targeting properties that had recently suffered catastrophic fires. Noah stared at the screen of her laptop. This is impossible. Each file bore the digital signature of the Metropolitan Integrity Commission, the MIC, the city's anti-corruption watchdog. They are approving these seizures, she said, scrolling faster. But the data is cooked. Look, this report claims structural failure before the fire, but this is my original inspection. I flagged it for faulty wiring, not structural failure. They are using my reports, altering them. And then the MIC signs off on the seizure after the property burns and the insurance pays Orion. An insider, Luca said. He was leaning against the cold concrete wall, watching her work. It has to be, Noah agreed, her mind racing. Someone inside the MIC is working with Orion Trust. They are using the PMSB reports as a shopping list, closing the loop legally so no one questions the insurance payouts. You are no longer safe in your apartment, Luca stated. The people who used Evan will now wonder where he is, and they will come looking for you. He did not take her to a gaudy mansion guarded by gates and men with guns. He drove the SUV himself, north along the coastal highway, until they reached a gravel road that led to a bluff. The safe house was a decommissioned lighthouse. It stood alone against the sky, a cylinder of white brick and weathered iron. Inside, it was modernized, clean and sparse, filled with high-end communications equipment. There was no luxury, only function. The only sounds were the rhythmic sweep of the single Type A rotating light above them and the low, mechanized hoot of the foghorn out on the point. It was isolated, defensible, and quiet. They stood in the circular lantern room, the city a distant smear of lights to the south. I will find the data trail, Noah said, setting up her laptop. I do this my way, by the code, by the law. I understand, Luca said. He stood by the massive, curved glass. I have given my word. There will be no violence, not while you are present. I will protect you, but I will not interfere with your process. You say that, Noah challenged, looking up, but your world is built on interference. My world is built on knowing who the real players are, Luca countered. He looked out at the dark water. You are looking for the man who lit the match. I am looking for the man who paid for it. You must learn. Noah, the man setting these fires is not hiding in an alley wearing a mask. He's sitting in a boardroom. He wears a tie. Sleep was a debt she could not pay. In the lighthouse, the air was too quiet, too clean. The rhythmic sweep of the massive lens above was a slow, agonizing metronome. Noah sat at the small kitchen table in the lantern room, the dark ocean invisible beyond the glass, her mind replaying the violation of her apartment. The hiss of an espresso machine broke the silence. Luca was awake, moving with an economy of motion in the confined space. He placed a small, intensely dark coffee in front of her. He did not ask. He just knew. He sat opposite, the narrow table the only thing between them. The foghorn hooted, a low, mournful sound. "The tape on your wrist," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It is coming undone." Noah looked down. The white athletic tape was frayed, and the joint throbbed. He slid a small, black first aid box across the table. "I can do it," she said, her voice rough from exhaustion. "I know." He paused. "Allow me." She hesitated, every instinct screaming, but she was too tired to argue, and her hand was shaking. She extended her left arm. His hands, which she had only seen as instruments of command, were surprisingly careful. He unwrapped the old tape slowly, his gaze clinical, assessing the dark purple swelling. His touch was firm, supporting her wrist from beneath. He started the new wrap, his movements precise, applying pressure that was supportive, not painful. It was the most gentle touch she had experienced in a decade, and it came from the most dangerous man in Port Meridian. The contrast made her skin prickle. "You grew up with this," she whispered, looking at his hands. "This control." He finished securing the tape, cutting it perfectly. "I grew up at 2 tables. One was in my grandmother's kitchen. It was loud, full of arguments about family, loyalty, and tradition." He looked up, his eyes reflecting the sweeping light. "The other was in an economics lecture hall. I learned that both worlds are about leverage. One uses emotion, the other uses debt." "I just grew up running," Noah admitted. The confession slipped out before she could stop it. "A different rental apartment every 6 months, always half a step ahead of Evan's anger. I did not learn about leverage. I learned how to check the locks and know the fire exits before I ever unpacked a bag." "You learned how to survive," he observed. "I learned how to inspect," she corrected, pulling her hand back. "There is a difference." Her phone, sitting on the table, vibrated, a text from a restricted number. It was a video file. Her blood went cold. She pressed play. It was her apartment. The camera moved slowly, almost casually. Her sofa cushions were slashed, her books swept from the shelves. The camera panned to her bedroom, her closet doors ripped open, her few items of clothing thrown on the floor. It was a violation, a message of absolute access. The air left her lungs. A small, choked sound escaped her throat. The room began to gray at the edges. "Noah!" Luca's voice cut through the panic. "Breathe!" "They were in my home. They are gone. Look at me." He did not move from his chair. He did not reach for her. He kept his hands flat on the table, visible. "Breathe with me. In for 4 seconds, hold for 7, out for 8. She shook her head, her breath coming in short, useless gasps. "Do it, no," he commanded. It was not a request. It was an anchor. In, 4, hold, 7, out, 8. She squeezed her eyes shut and did it. The foghorn sounded. In, 4, hold, 7, out, 8. The lighthouse beam swept past. He did not touch her. He just sat there, a fixed point, guiding her breathing until the shaking in her chest began to subside and the world snapped back into focus. He had respected her space, giving her the tools to fight her own panic without overwhelming her. The next morning, the sun was a weak wash of color. "I have to go back," she said. "To the bar? I missed something. If they used my report to target it, I missed how—" He drove her. The alley was still cordoned off, the smell of wet charcoal and chemicals hanging in the air. Luca stayed by the SUV, a silent silhouette against the morning glare. He watched, but he let her lead. Noah ducked under the yellow tape. The ground was a mess of debris and dried foam. She went straight to the floor, near the charred door jamb. She scraped away a patch of dried foam crust. There, faint white paint markings, nearly invisible. They were not measurements, they were symbols. "Routing codes," she whispered, her blood running cold. She recognized the archaic symbols. They were from an old, unofficial system used by firefighters decades ago, a way to mark lines during complex training, burns, or controlled backfires. One set for water, another for a mixed gasoline slurry. Evan was a brute. He was not smart enough for this. This was planned by a professional, someone who understood fire. A high-pitched mechanical whine broke the silence. Noah looked up. A small, black drone, its red camera light blinking, hovered over the alley opening. It was watching her. She froze, exposed in the center of the ruins. Luca moved. He did not run to her. He did not yell. He simply stepped out from the shadow of the vehicle, walking calmly toward the alley entrance. He stopped, placing himself directly between the drone and her position. He tilted his head, looking up at the machine as if it were a mild annoyance. The low morning sun threw his shadow long and sharp, a protective blade of darkness that fell perfectly across Noah, hiding her face from the drone's lens. It was not an act of passion, it was an act of precision. The drone hovered for another second, then banked sharply, zipping away over the rooftops. He turned back. She was still kneeling in the ash. The sunlight cut across the alley, illuminating the dust motes. Their eyes met. A long, silent 50-foot stare. For the first time, Noah did not see the power. She saw the absolute, terrifying discipline that contained it. She saw the calculation. And Luca, looking at her, did not see a victim. He did not see the bruises. He saw the inspector who knew the codes, the woman who understood structure, the person whose entire life had been about finding the weakness in a system and locking the fire doors against the blaze. When they returned to the lighthouse, an encrypted email was waiting. It was not from the MIC, it was from the OSR, the Office of Strategic Revenue, a federal agency. The message was cold, polite, and not a request. They were inviting her to a mandatory interview regarding the Orion Trust. They also noted, in sterile language, that her new association with Mr. Luca Belandi was a matter of significant federal interest. They wanted her as a witness, and they were going to use her as bait. The Dockline night market was an assault on the senses, and for the first time in days, it was not a hostile one. It smelled of fried fish, spilled sugar, and the low-tide brine of the harbor. Neon signs buzzed, reflecting pink and green on the wet pavement. Luca navigated the throng, not with force, but with a presence that seemed to part the crowd instinctively. Noah walked beside him, her wrapped wrist tucked into her jacket pocket. She felt hideously exposed. This was not a tactical move. This was a statement. Anyone watching, anyone who mattered, would see her. They would see she was not a disposable pawn. Some low-level inspector Evan Pike had exploited. She was walking through the heart of the city, untouched, beside Luca Belandi. He stopped at a stall sending up plumes of savory smoke. 2 swordfish sandwiches, he said to the vendor, passing over a folded bill that made the man's eyes widen. He handed one wrapped in paper to Noah. They ate standing by a railing overlooking the dark water. The bread was crisp, the fish hot and perfectly grilled. It was the first real food she had tasted in days. "You're safe here," he said, not looking at her, but watching the crowd. "I am on display," she countered, her voice low. "There is a difference between being a target and being a statement." He took a bite of his sandwich. "You needed to be seen. Now, the rumors that you are a temporary problem, they stop." Noah watched a group of teenagers laughing, throwing popcorn at each other. A strange, unfamiliar bubble rose in her chest. "I used to count stairs," she said, the admission surprising her. Luca turned his head, his dark eyes questioning. "When I was a kid, when Evan was in a mood, I would count things to stay calm, the steps to my bedroom, The ceiling tiles, the seconds between his yells. It is a stupid habit. It is a coping mechanism, he said. It is structural analysis, she replied, finding the load-bearing points in a moment so you know what will hold. She looked down at the sandwich, then up at him, and a small, rusted laugh escaped her. It was sharp and real. My high school physics teacher thought I was a genius. I just did not want the house to fall. His expression softened. Just for a second, he saw her. Inspector Breyer. The voice was flat, official. The bubble of normalcy burst. Two men in identical, ill-fitting gray suits stood 5 feet away. They looked like government-issue furniture. Metropolitan Integrity Commission, the taller one said, flashing a badge. We need you to come with us. A few questions regarding your recent field reports. Noah tensed, her hand instinctively going to the small toolkit she still carried in her bag. Luca did not move, but his presence was a wall. He finished chewing. Slowly. He looked at the agents. Then, in a move that shocked Noah, he took one deliberate step back, folded his arms, and nodded toward her. She handles her own professional correspondence, Luca said, his voice polite, but with an underlying finality. He was giving her the floor. He was respecting the line she had drawn. Noah turned, facing the agents. Her fear was still there, but the panic was gone, replaced by a cold surge of her old authority. I am not coming with you. If you have questions, you can submit them through my legal counsel. You do not have counsel on record, the agent snapped. I do now, Noah said, gesturing vaguely toward Luca, and I have conditions. I will provide my unedited inspection files, the ones I suspect you are very interested in, but in return, I want a full audit. I want the MIC to formally investigate the Office of Strategic Revenue. I do not trust a single agency right now. I want you to cross-check each other. Put that in writing, and my files are yours. The agents stared, baffled. They were used to intimidation, not negotiation. Before they could reply, a woman's shriek cut through the market noise. My daughter, has anyone seen my daughter? A small girl, no older than 5, was standing 20 feet away, crying, caught in the bottleneck of the crowd. The MIC agents looked annoyed by the interruption. Noah was already moving. Stay here, she snapped at the agents and pushed past them. She knelt, putting herself on the child's level, ignoring the crowd pushing past her. Hey, she said, her voice dropping, becoming the calmest thing in the chaotic square. What is your name? I am Noah. I am going to help you. She got the girl's name, Lily. She calmed the mother, got a description of her clothing, and in less than 30 seconds, had market security coordinating. She created a small, safe bubble in the middle of the panic, her entire focus on the child, directing the adults with the practiced ease of someone who controls disaster for a living. When a security guard finally led the girl back to her mother, Noah melted back into the shadows by the railing. Luca was watching her, his expression unreadable. The two MIC agents, looking flustered, simply nodded stiffly and disappeared into the crowd. They walked to a restaurant boat docked at the end of the pier. On the top deck, the air was cold, the market noise a distant hum. You were good with the child, he said. It is my job, she replied. Structural integrity. People are the structure. The lighthouse is containment, Lucas said, getting to the point. But you will not be contained. You need active protection, a detail. I am not one of your soldiers. Luca, I will not have men in suits following me. It is not for them to control you. It is for them to stop a bullet. The drone was a warning. The next move will not be. She looked at the city lights. He was right. Temporary, she stated. On a contract, I want a termination clause. I can cancel it at any time, for any reason, with one word, no argument. He nodded. Done. His phone vibrated, a text. He read it, his jaw tightening. Orion is moving faster than I thought. A leak from my contacts at the Port Authority. They are planning to torch the Seaview cold storage facility. Tonight, the insurance policy on it tripled yesterday. He looked at her, the moment hanging in the cold, salt air. He did not give an order. He did not make a plan. He simply asked the most important question she had ever been asked. What do you want to do? Noah looked at the warehouse, a dark block against the skyline. She knew that building. She had inspected it 3 months ago. They will be expecting an inspector to file a report or a cop to show up with a warrant. They will not be expecting a tradeswoman. What do you mean? I am going to stop the accident before it happens. I am going to install a shut-off valve. 2 hours later, they were in the sub-basement of the cold storage facility. It was freezing, the hum of the massive condensers vibrating in her bones. Luca was a shadow, guarding the hatch. Noah had her tool bag. She found the main riser for the fire suppression system, tapped into it, almost invisibly, was a secondary line the accelerant feed, disguised as a pressure conduit. Working by the light of a small penlight, her fingers numb, she cut into the pipe, her tools making almost no sound. She threaded the pipe, installed the emergency shut-off valve, and tightened it. Then, she attached a small, black device to the pipe. "A thermal beacon," she whispered, her breath fogging. The second they try to light this, the localized heat spike even half a degree above ambient will trigger this. It sends a signal to every firehouse in the city before the smoke detectors even register. They cannot burn it down. We just canceled the party. The thermal beacon had worked. The alarm at the cold storage facility had blared before a single flame appeared, sending the arsonist scattering and the fire department to a confusingly intact building. But the victory felt hollow. In the lighthouse, Luca was reviewing security footage from the warehouse's loading dock, provided by one of his port contacts. He was sloppy, Luca said, his voice flat. He pointed to the screen. A man in a dark utility uniform was clearly visible, fumbling with a canister. He did not check for cameras on the private loading dock, only the public street. "I do not know him," Noah said, leaning closer. But her eyes were not on the arsonist. They were on the plans he had dropped, a sheaf of papers that scattered in the wind before he scooped them up. She zoomed in, enhancing the grainy image. Her breath hitched. "That is not possible." "What?" "Those plans, the symbology, the accelerant routing. That is mine." She ran to her laptop, her hands flying across the keys. She pulled up an old file from her personal archives. It was a research paper, a thesis she had written during her internship at the PMFSB, outlining theoretical vulnerabilities in the city's older, pressurized fire suppression systems, a what-if scenario, a way to show how a fire could be made worse by the very system designed to stop it. "This is it," she whispered, her face pale. "This is the technical file they have been using to design the accidents. They did not just use my inspection reports. They used my mind." Luca was silent, watching her. "It was an internal draft, Luca. I wrote it when I was an intern, almost 7 years ago. It was purely theoretical. It was supposed to show our vulnerabilities so we could fix them. It was never published." "Then who had access to it?" he asked. "It went to the archives. All intern projects did. They had to be reviewed before being filed or discarded." She froze. "Randall Keene, the head of archives. He reviews every file before it is released or archived. He signed off on mine. He told me it was promising but impractical and that it would be buried." Luca pulled out his phone. He did not make a call, but typed a few quick messages. His network, the Bureau d'Ombre, was always listening. Minutes stretched into an agonizing silence, broken only by the hoot of the foghorn. His phone chimed. He turned the screen to her. It was a simple list of appointments from Randall Keene's digital calendar, pulled from the city's servers. 3 weeks ago, a meeting. 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago. The name was the same, Evan Pike. The floor dropped out from under her. It was not just that Evan was a violent, parasitic drunk. He was the mule, Keene. The quiet man in the basement of the PMFSB had the access. Evan, with his connection to a low-level inspector, was the perfect, deniable person to carry the stolen draft out of the building, her work, her identity, her proximity. It had all been used. A low, terrible sound came from her throat. She stumbled back, hitting the cold brick of the lighthouse wall. "It is my fault." The words were ripped out of her. "I wrote it. I brought Evan into my life. I gave them the key." She slid down the wall, her head in her hands. This was worse than a fire. This was her own design, her own knowledge, twisted to destroy. Luca crouched in front of her, but he did not touch her. He waited until she looked up, her eyes wide with self-loathing. "Noah," he said, his voice hard, sharp, and absolute. "If a man takes a knife you designed for a kitchen and uses it to kill, is the fault in the steel or in the hand that holds it? The fault belongs to the man with the knife, not the one who designed the kitchen." His logic was brutal, clean, and exactly what she needed. It cut through the guilt. She took a deep, shuddering breath and pushed herself up. Keen. He is the center of it. He is the city side link, Luca agreed. Orion pays him for the technical data and the list of vulnerable properties. He uses Evan, they build the fires. The MIC insider signs off on the cleanup. It is a perfect closed loop. "Then we break it," she said, her voice hard. The next day, the squeeze came. The OSR and the MIC both requested meetings, and they made it clear she was not to bring Luca. They wanted her isolated. The OSR was blunt. They wanted to use her as bait. "We know you have been in contact with Belandi." The OSR agent, a woman with a face like iron, said, "We want you to feed him information. We want to see how he reacts, what resources he moves. We are building a financial case. We will get him on racketeering." The MIC, in another room, was just as predatory. "We believe Randall Keene is the leak," the agent told her. "We want you to go back to work. Act normal. We want to follow the data. We believe he is reporting to Belandi." They both wanted Luca. They both wanted to use her. They saw her as a tool. Noah went back to the lighthouse. She laid it all out for Luca. "They think they have me in a box. They think I am your weakness, or I am their bait." "And which are you?" he asked, his face unreadable. "I am the inspector," she said, her eyes flashing, "and I am setting the terms." She spent the next hour outlining a 2-layer plan. "I will agree to cooperate," she said. "I will tell them there has been a rupture, that I am afraid of you, that you are the monster they think you are." "You will play the betrayed woman," Luca said, understanding. "And you," she countered, "will play the man who was betrayed. You will make it public that I am no longer under your protection. You will move assets, look vulnerable. You will draw Orion and Rivoli, or whoever is behind this, out into the open. You will clear the field." "And while they are all watching us," he asked, "while they are all watching us, I am doing my real work. I am not just a witness. I am an engineer. I am going to plant a bubble code into the suppression system of their next target, a non-toxic chemical tracer bonded to the foam. Whoever triggers the system, whoever lights the match, will be marked. It will be invisible, odorless, but under a specific UV light, they will glow. It is forensics they do not even know exists." She faced him. "I will give this to the MIC and the OSR, but I have terms for them and for you. I told them no coercion, no immunity deals for Keene. And as for you, Luca, they must agree to firewall this investigation. They will judge Belandi Holdings on its legitimate assets only. What you do in the shadows, they can chase another day. But for this, I will not let them use me to destroy your clean assets." Luca watched her, a slow, dangerous admiration in his eyes. He had offered her protection. She was now offering him a strategy. He would be exposed, hunted by both his rivals and the feds. "They will believe you are turning on me," he said. "It is a high-risk play, for both of us." "They will believe what they want to believe," Noah said, "but we will know the truth." He nodded once. "I accept the role." The rooftop greenhouse was an absurd pocket of warmth in the cold. Misty night, rain thin as thread, ticked against the glass panes above. It was the designated meeting spot for their breakup, chosen for its wide-open sightlines. A perfect stage. Noah arrived first, her hands deep in her pockets, watching the slick, dark city below through the condensation. The door hissed open. Luca entered, bringing a gust of cold air with him. He was not in a suit, but a dark wool coat, beaded with rain. He shrugged it off, leaving it on a nearby potting bench, his movements economical, his eyes never leaving her face. The greenhouse smelled of damp earth, wet wood, and the faint, sharp tang of mint from the coffee he must have had. He stopped 10 feet away. The space was filled with the sound of the rain, a million tiny, insistent taps. "You are sure about this?" he stated. It was not a question. "I am sure," she replied, but her voice was tight. This was the part she had not anticipated. The performance was one thing. The reality of standing this close to him, knowing what she was about to do, was another. I am terrified of being controlled. Luca, of someone else holding the strings. That is my whole life. Evan, my job. Now this." "And I," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the damp air, "have a fear of loss. I do not protect things casually. Noah, and I do not let them go easily." The confession hung between them, as raw and real as the cold night outside. He was not talking about the plan. He was talking about her. He took a slow step, then another. He stopped just beyond her reach, his hand, the one he had used to wrap her wrist, lifted slightly, palm up, an offering, not a command. She looked at his hand, then at his face. His eyes were asking, seeking permission. Slowly, as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, she lifted her own hand and placed it, not in his, but on his forearm. His skin was warm, his pulse steady beneath her fingers. He did not grab her. He simply covered her hand with his other one, a light, protective cage. The rain beat a steady rhythm on the glass, their breath fogged in the air, mingling. "Noah," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "my boundaries are not yours. What are your limits?" No surprises," she whispered back, her heart hammering. "No force. I have to be the one. I have to say yes." "No surprises," he repeated, his gaze holding hers, a solemn vow. "No force. And you must say yes." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "Is this a yes, Noah?" She looked at his mouth, then back to his eyes. "Yes." The word was a sigh, a surrender, a key turning in a lock. He did not lunge. He did not pull. He leaned in, slowly, giving her an eternity to pull back. Their shoulders brushed. One of his hands moved, the one that had been on her arm, sliding up to the back of her neck, his fingers threading into her hair. The touch was electric, but controlled. His other hand found the small of her back, not pulling her, just resting there. An anchor. When his lips finally met hers, it was not a collision, it was a discovery. It was not rushed or desperate, but deliberate, careful, and deeply, shockingly gentle. It tasted of coffee and mint, and the clean, cold smell of the rain on his skin. It was a question, and a statement, and an answer, all at once. He learned the curve of her mouth, and she learned the solid, unyielding strength of his. It was a new language, and they were both learning to speak it, each movement careful, intentional. She let out a small, trembling breath against his lips, and her hands, which had been frozen at her sides, came up to rest on his chest. She could feel the steady, powerful thump of his heart beneath her palms. He deepened the kiss slightly, and she tilted her head, pressing back, her fear dissolving into a different kind of fire, a warmth that started in her chest and spread, slow and molten, through her limbs. When she finally broke away, breathless, she did not step back. She pressed her forehead against his sternum, a place of solid, absolute strength. She closed her eyes, just feeling the thrum of his heartbeat, the solid wall of him against her. His arms came around her, pulling her close, but it was not a possessive, crushing hold. He just held her. He tucked her head under his chin, one hand cradling her skull, the other splayed across her back. He held her as if she were made of glass, and as if she were the only thing holding him upright. His heart, which had been so steady, was now hammering against her ear, a rhythm that matched her own. It was not just calm control, he was disciplined passion. and his discipline, she realized, was entirely for her. They stood like that for a long time, the rain on the glass, the only sound, until her breathing slowed, matching the steady rhythm of his. There was a long, low lounge bench nearby, used for potting. He guided her to it, and they sat, not moving apart. They sat side by side, and his hand found hers, their fingers lacing together. "I dream about breakfast," she whispered into the silence. "Just a normal breakfast, reading the paper, arguing about who makes the coffee." "Legal work," he countered, his voice rough. "Consolidating the real estate, building things that do not have to be insured against themselves, safer buildings." He squeezed her hand. "A normal breakfast. I would like that." They sat, hands clasped, listening to the rain, suspended in a moment that was not part of the plan, a moment that was only theirs. Finally, the chill of the room began to seep in. It was time. The performance had to begin. Noah stood up. Luca stood with her. She did not let go of his hand. She looked up at him, her face set. They will be watching. They will be listening. She took his face in her hands, her wrapped wrist rough against his jaw. "Trust me," she whispered. It was the signal, the start of the con. She kissed him again, quick and hard, a brand, a promise. Then she let him go. "I will go first," she said, her voice loud enough to be caught by any listening device. I cannot do this. You are too dangerous." She grabbed her jacket, her movements jerky, her face a mask of practiced fear. She did not look back. She pushed through the door and disappeared into the rain. Luca waited. Exactly 1 minute. He picked up his coat, his face a mask of cold, betrayed anger. He walked to the opposite exit, the one that led to the service elevator, ensuring any watching cameras would see them leave by 2 different paths. The bait was set. The next morning, Noah sat in a sterile, glass-walled conference room at the Metropolitan Integrity Commission. The performance began. She gave her sworn statement, her voice flat, her face a mask of a woman betrayed and terrified. "He interfered," she said, the words tasting like ash. "Luca Belandi. He involved himself in an active investigation. He used my access, my reports. He has been pressuring me." She let her voice break. "Just a little. I'm afraid of what he will do. I want, for the record, to state that he has been interfering illegally." The MIC agents ate it up, their expressions a mix of smugness and predatory focus. They had their narrative. An hour later, she was in a different, darker room, this one belonging to the Office of Strategic Revenue. The air was different, colder, more professional. She slid a folded schematic across the table. "This is not a statement," she said. "This is the plan. The Orion Trust, or whoever they are, will try again. Their next logical target is the old ferry terminal warehouse. I have already analyzed its suppression system. This map," she tapped the paper, "shows the modification I will make. I am installing a bubble code into the foam reserve. It is a non-toxic radiological tracer, harmless, but when the system activates, anyone doused in that foam will be tagged. You will not see it. You will not smell it, but it will show up on your scanners. I am giving you a way to tag the arsonist, not just the fire." The OSR agent looked at the plan, then at her, and Belandi is a distraction for you and for them, Noah said, her voice dropping. "You let me handle my end. You just be ready to catch who I tag." The call came that afternoon. It was Evan, using a burner number, his voice a sweaty, nervous rasp. "Noah, thank God, you gotta help me. These guys I was involved with, they are crazy." "What do you want, Evan?" she asked, her voice ice. "I got it," he said, trying to sound important. "I got the whole thing, the Orion ledger, all their numbers, everything." He was lying, and he was a bad liar. "Meet me. Tonight, the old Mariner ferry, Pier 41. You come. You tell them to back off me, and I give you the ledger. You keep your mouth shut. I keep mine. Noah looked at the wall of the lighthouse. A setup. You do not have the ledger, Evan. I do, I swear, just come alone. He hung up. She immediately relayed the meet to the OSR and Emike, and to Luca. It is not Evan, she told Luca over a secure line. He's not smart enough to have a ledger. He's just the bait. He's being used. This has to be the Rivoli Syndicate, using the Orion name as a front to draw you out. Luca's voice was calm. I agree, and I will not be there. What? I am playing my part, Noah, the jilted man. I am already, very publicly, moving a valuable, unguarded shipment across town tonight, a complete decoy. The Rivoli family has received a very credible tip that I will be exposed. They will believe I am occupied. They will be at the ferry, not for me, but to silence their loose end, Evan, and to grab you. They are clearing the board, Noah whispered. And you, Luca said, his voice softening, are clearing the field for them. They will feel secure, they will feel safe, and you will have all the players in one place. Night. Pier 41 was a graveyard of rusted metal and creaking silence. The Mariner was a huge, derelict car ferry, listing slightly to one side, in a black surveillance van, 2 blocks away. Tension was high. He is on board. We have a thermal on one target, the MIC agent hissed. We go now. We grab Pike. You will stand down, Noah snapped, her voice low. She was in the van, wearing a simple dark jacket. You go in hot, and they kill him, and me. This is not about Evan. This is about the boss. You will wait for my signal. I have a light pen. When I click it 3 times, you move, not before. This is our operation, Inspector, the MIC agent started. No, the OSR agent said, his eyes on his own screen. It is her trap. We wait for the signal. Noah zipped her jacket. The top button was a high-frequency audio transmitter, wired to a battery pack taped to her ribs. They would hear everything. Wait for the light, she said, and stepped out into the dark. The gangplank moaned under her weight. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and dead water. Old mooring ropes, thick as her arm, creaked against the hull, a slow, rhythmic groan that sounded like a warning. She found Evan on the open car deck. He was shaking, his face slick with sweat under the one functioning security light. You came. He breathed, relieved. Where is it? Evan. Here. He fumbled, pulling a small, black hard drive from his pocket. This is it. Now you gotta call them off. Call who off, Evan? A new voice, smooth, cold, and amused. A man stepped out from behind a rusted support column. He was flanked by 2 others. He was wearing a suit that looked out of place in the decay. This was not Keen. This was not a low-level thug. Evan, you have been a terrible employee, the man said, taking the hard drive. And you, Inspector Breyer, you have been a significant problem. This was him, the head of the Rivoli Syndicate, the man behind Orion. He had come to clean house. It was you, Noah said, keeping her voice steady. The fires, Keen, all of it. Keen was a useful clerk. Evan was a useful idiot. He smiled. And you are the loose end. Noah's hand was in her pocket, clutching 2 items, the light pen, and a small, sealed vial, a decoy, a prop. What is that? The Rivoli boss asked, noticing her hand. Insurance, Noah said. A little sample of the chemical accelerant you have been using, my own mix. She pulled her hand out. The men tensed. Do not move, the boss ordered, his hand going inside his coat. My mistake, Noah said, and tripped. She stumbled forward, her body acting, her mind calculating. The vial flew from her hand. It arced, landing perfectly on the deck between the Rivoli boss and his 2 men. It shattered, splashing a clear, odorless liquid, her bubble code solution, across the floor and onto their expensive leather shoes and the cuffs of their trousers. Clumsy, the boss sneered, stepping back, but it was too late. They were marked. Now, Noah whispered, her hand in her other pocket, her thumb on the pen. But before she could click it, the night exploded. The deep, deafening blast of the mariner's own foghorn echoed across the water. It was not her signal. She looked up at the ferry's bridge. A shadow was silhouetted against the moon. It was not the OSR. It was not the Mike. The signal had come, but it was not the one she had planned. The foghorn's blast, a deafening, unnatural thunder, was not her signal. It was his. For a second, the deck froze. Then, chaos erupted. The Rivoli boss shouted in Italian. From the shadows of the pier, from the dark recesses of the car deck, men emerged. They were not federal agents. They were Rivoli's men, drawn by the signal, flooding the deck. Evan shrieked, a sound of pure panic, and pointed at Noah. It was her. She set you up. She brought the feds. She brought Belandi. He was trying to sell her out one last pathetic time. But Noah was not looking at Evan. She was moving. She ran past the panicked men, not toward the exit, but toward the bulkhead. Her hand found what it was looking for, a red T-bar handle, the manual override for the ferry's fire suppression system. She grabbed it with both hands and pulled. There was a great, mechanical sigh. Then, from nozzles overhead, a chemical fog erupted, not water, but a high-pressure mist designed to suffocate a car fire. In seconds, the deck was plunged into a dense, swirling whiteout. Men yelled, their voices muffled. In the surveillance van, the OSR agent swore, "She's blind us. What is she doing?" "She's not blinding us," the MIC agent said, his voice tight with sudden understanding. "She's marking them. Hit the floods, the UV floods, now." Massive, pier-mounted lights snapped on, bathing the mariner in a sterile, purplish-black light. On the deck, the scene was from a nightmare. The artificial fog swirled, and in the mist, the Rivoli boss and his two men glowed, their expensive shoes. The cuffs of their trousers shone with a sickly, bright blue phosphorescence. The bubble code, they were tagged, undeniable. High above them, on the exposed wing of the ferry's bridge, a man stood. He was a perfect silhouette against the dark sky. Luca Belandi. He was alone. His hands were at his sides. Empty. He had kept his word. No guns in front of her. The Rivoli boss, his face a mask of rage, saw Noah through the mist, glowing like a ghost. He lunged, a long-bladed knife appearing in his hand. Luca was a blur. He was no longer on the bridge. He was on the deck, moving with a speed that seemed impossible. He did not meet the attack head-on. He intercepted it. As the boss lunged, Luca moved with the man's momentum, not against it. He caught the knife wrist, redirecting it, stepping inside the man's guard. There was a sharp, wet snap as he twisted the arm, locking the joint in one fluid motion. He slammed the man's hand, still holding the knife, against a metal railing and pinned him there. It was not a fight. It was a clinical, brutal act of risk management. Federal agents do not move hands where I can see them. The OSR team swarmed up the gangplank. Weapons raised, their blacklight torches cutting the fog. Luca stepped back from the writhing, cursing Rivoli boss, leaving the feds to do the cuffing. In the chaos, Noah saw Evan. He was not glowing. He was just a rat, slinking away from the light, disappearing down a dark, narrow hatchway to the decks below. "He's in the bilge," she yelled, her transmitter catching the words. "He's going for the engine room." She plunged down the ladder after him, the smell of diesel and rust hitting her. The engine room was dark, a cavern of cold metal. Evan was there, at a bank of valves, frantically spinning a large red wheel. "Evan, no." "I will kill us all," he screamed, his voice echoing. "You will not take me. I will open the old oil feed. I will burn this ship to the water." He was trying to flood the bilge with residual fuel, to create a vapor bomb. Noah did not run at him. She was an inspector. She saw the danger, and she saw the solution. She grabbed a wooden wedge, used for chalking equipment, from a nearby locker. She snatched a yellow nylon rescue strap from a safety station on the bulkhead. As Evan fumbled with the seized valve, Noah slammed the wedge deep into the gear mechanism, jamming it solid. He shrieked, pulling at it, but it would not budge. Noah looped the strap around the wheel, cinching it to a solid steel pipe, making it impossible to turn. The valve was contained. Evan turned, his face contorted. He lunged at her, but the floor was slick with oily residue. His feet shot out from under him. He stumbled backward, his arms windmilling, and toppled over a low safety railing. He vanished into the dark. Open bilge pit below. There was a clang, then a terrified, choked cry. "Noah, help me, please, my hand." She peered over the edge. It was dangling, 10 feet down, his one hand clutching a greasy pipe. Below him was a dark, bottomless pit of black water and sludge. It would be so easy to just walk away, to let him go, the man who had haunted her, hurt her, and used her. She looked at her own, newly taped wrist. She looked at his desperate, terrified face. "No one," she whispered, the words a raw tear in her throat, "gets to make me you." She leaned down, her muscles screaming, and grabbed his outstretched wrist. Her own joint flared in agony, but she held on. She pulled, hauling his dead weight up, her heels digging into the slick floor. She dragged him over the railing and dumped him, coughing and sobbing, onto the metal deck. Just as the OSR agents thundered down the stairs, their lights finding the two of them, back on the main deck, the air was clearing. The Rivoli men, glowing and defeated, were being led away, near the gangplank. There was a different kind of commotion. An MIC agent was holding a portable UV light, aimed at another man in a suit, Randall Keene. "Mr. Keene, what's on your hand?" Keene, who had been part of the MIC's own surveillance team, froze. On the cuff of his suit and on the palm of his right hand was the unmistakable faint blue glow of the bubble code. He had been the one on the pier, the backup, who had come to confirm the package. He had touched the bait. The mole was caught. The deck was finally quiet. Across the chaos, Noah saw Luca. He was standing by the bridge ladder, hands in his pockets. He was not looking at the arrests. He was looking only at her. His face was a raw, complex map of worry, of bone-deep relief, and of a pride so fierce it was almost a physical force. Noah stood, smeared in grease, foam, and sweat, her wrist throbbing. She met his gaze. She could not move toward him. Not yet. She gave him one. Sharp, exhausted nod. "It is done." She turned away. Looking past the pier, the yellow security lights of the harbor seemed to flicker. They were shifting, softening, bleeding into a pale, fragile pink at the edges. The long night was over. The sunrise was coming. The OSR agents had hauled Evan back onto the car deck. He was shivering, covered in grease, a pathetic, weeping mess. They pushed him toward the center of the deck, where the purple UV lights still cast their sickly glow. And Luca was there. He had not moved from the bridge ladder. He simply walked from its base, his steps silent and measured, until he stood directly in front of Evan. The federal agents, seeing his face, instinctively took a step back. Luca's anger was not hot. It was a cold, pure, absolute void. It was the empty space between stars, a pressure that sucked all the air from the deck. His hands were at his sides, but his right hand was slowly, almost unconsciously, clenching and unclenching. This was not the businessman. This was not the protector. This was the head of the Belandi family. And he was looking at the physical manifestation of all the pain Noah had ever endured. Her past was a whimpering, greasy thing, and it was 3 feet in front of him. "You put your hands on her," Luca said. His voice was not a whisper, not a yell. It was a statement of fact that was also a death sentence. "You used her name. You used her fear." Evan whimpered, trying to back away, but an OSR agent put a hand on his shoulder, holding him in place, his own face a mask of wary neutrality. Noah watched, her heart in her throat. This was it, the moment she had not known she was dreading. Luca could end him. A word, a gesture. He could have him lost in the federal system, or he could simply break his neck. All her life, someone else had held this power. And now, the man she was standing with, held it. As Luca's hand started to lift, she moved. She stepped directly between them. She did not touch Luca. She did not look at Evan. She spoke, her voice clear and strong in the cold morning air, to Luca's chest. "Do not." He stopped, his eyes, burning with a cold fire, lifted from Evan to her. "If you do what you know how to do," she said, her voice shaking, but not with fear, with conviction. "If you make him disappear, then you prove them all right. You prove the MIC right. You prove the OSR right." She finally looked up into his face. "You make me an excuse. You make me the reason you acted, not the partner who had a plan. You will just be the man who holds power, and I will just be the thing he was protecting." There was a terrible, stretched silence. The only sound was the lapping of the water against the hull. "Noah, please," Evan sobbed, sensing a reprieve. "Tell him I did not mean it. I will tell them you are crazy. I will tell everyone." His pleading, even now, was laced with his old, pathetic threats. Noah did not even flinch. She never took her eyes off Luca. She reached into her jacket and pulled out the small, black hard drive, the real ledger. She held it out, not to Luca, but to the OSR agent who stood, frozen, watching this drama. "This," Noah said, her voice ringing with the authority of her office, "is the Orion ledger. You will take it as evidence." The agent snapped from his stupor. "Took it. And you will take him." She pointed at Evan. "And these are my terms. You will listen, and you will agree, or this entire case, and your star witness, walks off this boat." The agent's eyes widened. "One," Noah said, "he's not to be handed to any affiliated organization, not Rivoli's men and not Belandi's. He is a federal asset. 2, he will be placed in legal isolation, full financial monitoring, no contact. 3, he does not disappear. He does not get lost. He will stand trial for his part in this, and he will go to a federal prison. His power, his name, his access to my life is erased legally." She had not saved him. She had, in her own precise, structural way, entombed him. Luca watched her, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. He saw her, standing tall in her own power, using the law as a weapon, a scalpel, a shield. He saw the inspector. He looked at Evan, the anger still there, a white-hot coal. He unclenched his hand, he looked at Noah, and he released his breath. "By sunrise," Luca said, his voice rough. "He's gone from your life." He looked at the OSR agent, his eyes still holding a lethal promise. According to the law that she chose, the OSR agent nodded, quickly. We agree. He grabbed Evan's arm. "You are under arrest." As they pulled Evan away in cuffs, he was still screaming, "Noah, you cannot do this." She just watched him go, watched as they loaded him onto a small, fast tactical boat. The boat sped away, and as it crossed the harbor, the first true ray of sunlight, a blade of cold, sharp light cut across the water, illuminating the white wake. He was gone, vanished by sunrise, not by blood, but by the book. On the pier, the MIC was cuffing a pale, trembling Randall Keene. The Rivoli men, their glowing shoes a mark of their own arrogance, were being loaded into vans. The Orion Trust, built on paper and fire, had collapsed when the hard drive was opened. The deck was quiet. The federal agents were busy, cleaning up, their voices muted. Luca turned to Noah. The anger was gone, replaced by something she could not read, a vulnerability. He had passed her test. He had stood down. He had chosen her way. And now he was waiting for her verdict on him. Noah was exhausted, her entire body one great, deep ache. Her wrist throbbed. She walked the few steps that separated them. She looked up at his face, at the man who commanded an empire, but who had just yielded his power for her. She lifted her left hand, the one with the white tape, the one he had first seen, the one he had wrapped. She did not touch his face. She laid her palm flat against his chest, over his heart. It was beating, hard and fast, under her hand. "You just proved," she whispered, her voice thick, "that you are a man who keeps his word, not just a man who holds power." His hand came up, covering hers, his strong fingers lacing over her taped wrist. He did not say anything. The sun finally broke the horizon, flooding the deck of the old ferry with a brilliant, fiery gold. The night was over. They stood, not in front of each other, not behind but side by side, watching the day begin. Several months passed. The winter rains gave way to a crisp, clear spring. The sign on the door was new, the paint still smelling sharp. Breyer and Company, Firecraft. It was a small office, 2 rooms above a ship chandler, with a window that looked out over the working docks. Noah was on the phone, her booted foot up on her desk, reviewing a blueprint. "No," she said, her voice firm. "The pressure rating on those risers is non-negotiable. If you want to use the cheaper vendor, that is your choice. But my firm will not be signing off on it. You get the code, or you get another consultant." She hung up, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Her clients were varied. She had contracts with 3 major shipping lines, a new hotel developer, and Belandi Holdings. The last one was the most scrutinized. She only touched his legitimate properties, the commercial high-rises, the new condos, the warehouses he was genuinely trying to bring up to code. She refused all gray projects. Her integrity was the one asset she would never leverage. And Luca, to his credit, never asked her to. Luca, for his part, was in a war. Not a war of bullets, but a war of balance sheets and tradition. He was surgically separating his world. The legitimate assets were being consolidated, firewalled, and run with ruthless, transparent efficiency. The other side, the darker inheritance. He was ceding to a family council, a group of his uncles and cousins. He was not liquidating it, that was impossible, but he was stepping back, aiming to shrink its scope, to turn a sprawling, violent enterprise into a contained, quiet problem that, day by day, he had less to do with. It was a slow, dangerous turn, and it made him enemies on both sides. The MIC and the OSR had, in a rare moment of interagency logic, adopted Noah's bubble code. They called the program Port Shield, and they quietly consulted with her on its deployment. Her invention, born of her own trauma, was now the city's best defense against the very corruption it had exposed. Their home was not a mansion. It was not a fortress or a sterile safe house. It was a converted wooden loft on the top floor of an old rope factory, overlooking the harbor. It smelled of old wood, sea salt, and her. The kitchen counter was a single, massive piece of reclaimed pine, and it always had a faint trace of salt on it from the windows being open. Luca was learning to live without bodyguards in the room. His security detail, smaller now, but no less effective, remained outside the building, in the street, a silent, black sedan, but inside, he was just a man. Tonight, he was cooking. The smell of simmering tomatoes, garlic, and basil filled the warm space. Noah came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against the warm wool of his sweater. He stilled, leaning back into her embrace. After dinner, as they sat on the worn leather sofa, the city lights twinkling across the water, she initiated the ritual. She reached out, tugging on the sleeve of his shirt. He turned, understanding. She put her forehead against his, their eyes closed. "We good today," she whispered. It was their check-in, their structural analysis. He let out a long breath, his hands coming up to cup her face. "We are good," he confirmed, his voice a low rumble. Later, the quiet intimacy that was theirs, and theirs alone, unfolded. It was never planned. It started with his jacket dropping to a chair. It continued with his hand on the back of her neck, his thumb drawing slow circles, easing the tension from her day. It was a soft kiss, not on the mouth, but on her collarbone, a gentle, reverent touch. It was her hand, the one with the faded scars, coming up to cover his, holding it in place. His eyes were dark, asking the question he always asked, "Is this okay?" And her answer, always given, always true was a whisper. Yes, stay with me. Their connection was built on this, the explicit spoken consent, the right to say no, which, for the first time in her life, gave her the absolute freedom to say yes. As the city slept, his phone, on the kitchen counter, vibrated. A warning text from his port contact, a new crew, the Harbor Jacks, was trying to muscle in on Rivoli's old territory. A potential fire, a potential problem. Noah saw the message, her body tensing. Luca watched her. She looked at the phone, then at the man beside her, at the safety of their home. She reached over, locked the screen, and placed the phone face down. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Tomorrow, she said, not a denial, but a boundary. Tonight, they were choosing normal. It was their most profound act of rebellion. On the wall by the door, a single wooden peg held two items, his heavy, worn leather jacket and her old, scratched PMFSB hard hat, two worlds hanging side by side, not crushing each other, just existing. Noah walked out onto the small balcony, the wind whipping her hair, tasting of salt and distant rain. She heard him come up behind her. He did not touch her, just stood there, a warm, solid presence at her back. Then, slowly, his arms came around her, his hands settling on her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder. They stood, watching the lights of the harbor, in the far distance, at the edge of the world, the lighthouse. Their lighthouse cut its steady, slow beam through the darkness. Noah smiled, a real, slow, genuine smile. Their love was not a house fire. It was a structure, one they had built from the ground up, with its own codes, its own fail-safes. It had the highest safety rating possible, and they had just passed the hardest inspection of all they had chosen each other, not because they had no other options, but because they had all of them. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. Let us know in the comments so we can share our thoughts and connect. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.